The night smelled of rain and betrayal. A soft drizzle slid over the black surface of the lake, turning it into a mirror that reflected the trembling lights from Victor's Mercedes parked nearby. He stood behind his wife, Lana, his hand steady as he tied the last knot around her wrists. The rope scraped her skin, leaving faint red marks. She was 7 months pregnant, her breath short, her voice soft. "Victor, why are we here?" she asked, trying to smile through confusion. He leaned close, his breath warm but cold in meaning. "It's a surprise, baby. Just close your eyes." She hesitated, her instincts screaming, but the man she loved had never raised a hand to her before. She wanted to believe him. So she obeyed, her eyes closing, her hands tied behind her back with what she thought was playful intimacy. The wind grew stronger, shaking the leaves along the edge of the dock. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled like a warning. Victor glanced at his phone. A message blinked from Ava. "Do it now. No witnesses." His jaw tightened. He pocketed the phone, his reflection flickering across the lake's surface like a ghost. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind. Her fall, the splash, the silence afterward. Insurance money. Freedom. Ava's lips whispering, "Finally." He told himself it wasn't murder. It was destiny correcting itself. Lana felt the cold wood under her bare feet. "Victor, it's slippery. Please take off the blindfold," she murmured, her heart pounding faster. The baby kicked as if sensing her fear. She turned her head slightly, hearing him step back. "Victor?" Her voice cracked. "Where are you?" He didn't answer. The rope tightened. The push came fast, an explosion of motion. Her body fell forward, cutting through air, hitting the icy water with a sound that swallowed everything. The shock stole her breath. The cold bit her lungs as she struggled to move her bound hands. Panic burned her chest. She kicked, gasped, screamed bubbles into the dark. "Victor, please, my baby." Her voice broke under the surface. On the hill above, headlights pierced the mist. A black S-Class Mercedes slowed, its driver hesitating. In the back seat, Ethan Park, a man in a navy suit, tired eyes, and a life too full of silence, looked up from his phone. Through the fog, he saw movement, then a splash. He rolled down the window. The sound hit him like thunder. "Stop the car," he ordered, already unbuckling his seatbelt. The driver protested, but Ethan was out the door before the car halted. The rain soaked his jacket instantly. "Hello?" he shouted toward the dock. No answer, only the ripples spreading wide, a floating scarf, and a rope dangling from the edge. Then he saw her. A hand broke the surface, weak and trembling. Without thinking, he kicked off his shoes and dove. The water closed around him like a fist. Underneath, his hand brushed fabric, skin, and life. He pulled hard, lungs screaming, dragging her up toward the faint light above. When they surfaced, Lana coughed violently, choking water, gasping for air. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. "Victor, my husband, he pushed me," she whispered. Ethan cradled her head, adrenaline thundering in his veins. He turned toward the road, but Victor's car was already gone. Only tire marks on wet gravel remained. Ethan shouted to his driver, "Call 911 now." The siren of the approaching storm answered first. And then, from across the lake, a flicker of light, a phone screen. Someone was still watching, recording everything. The truth was already in motion. 3 weeks before that night, the city of Manhattan glittered like a diamond under a clear spring sky. The Grand Sterling Hotel was alive with laughter, champagne, and the clinking of cutlery as guests gathered for a charity gala. Lana Trun moved gracefully between the tables, adjusting name cards engraved with gold lettering, smoothing white tablecloths, and reminding herself to breathe. At 7 months pregnant, her back ached. But she smiled anyway. The baby kicked lightly beneath her silk dress, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. Victor arrived late, as always, wearing a tailored black tuxedo and that charming smile people believed in too easily. In his hand, a small Tiffany box. Inside, a charm bracelet shaped like a star. "For my shining girl," he said, slipping it onto her wrist. The gesture looked sweet from afar, but up close, Lana saw the fatigue in his eyes, the impatience behind his grin. "You look perfect tonight. Don't stress," he added, already glancing at his iPhone, typing fast. The message he sent was short. "Leaving after dinner. She won't suspect a thing." Lana thought he was texting a client. She had no reason to think otherwise. She leaned against a chair, catching her reflection in a mirrored wall. She looked tired, older than 29, yet still hopeful. She adjusted her pearl earrings and whispered to herself, "Just get through the night." Ethan Park entered quietly through the side door, invited by one of the sponsors. The billionaire rarely attended public events, but this one funded scholarships for underprivileged students, something he personally cared about. His assistant handed him a MacBook Pro with the donor list. His eyes drifted down the ballroom, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Lana. The same Lana from college. Her laughter, her notes written in the margins of borrowed books. He hadn't seen her in years. His chest tightened. At the main table, Victor raised a toast, speaking about family, resilience, and love. Cameras flashed. Lana smiled on cue, though her hands trembled slightly under the table. Ethan watched from afar, noticing how Victor touched his phone every few minutes, how his eyes scanned the room instead of his wife. Something in Ethan's gut twisted, an instinct honed from years of reading people. But he said nothing. When the gala ended, Lana excused herself to the restroom. On her way, she passed the service hallway and froze. Victor stood there, half hidden behind a pillar, speaking softly to a woman in a crimson dress. "Ava." The woman's manicured hand rested casually on his chest. Lana recognized her instantly. Ava Nguyen, a PR consultant Victor had mentioned working with. Their eyes met for a split second. Ava smiled politely and walked away, leaving behind a perfume so heavy it filled the corridor. Victor turned sharply, startled to see Lana. "Oh, honey, that was just business talk," he said, forcing a laugh. She nodded, but something cracked inside her. Later that night, back in their apartment overlooking Central Park, Lana sat on the bed while Victor poured whiskey. The city lights reflected off the glass windows. "Who was she really?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. He just sipped his drink, scrolling his phone. "Victor, I'm scared. You've been distant. Is it because of the baby?" Her voice trembled. He finally looked up, eyes cold. "You always overthink. Just rest, Lana. You need it." When he turned off the lights, she lay awake, listening to the hum of traffic below. Her heart told her something was terribly wrong. She picked up her phone and typed Ethan's name into social media, hesitating. They hadn't spoken in years. She deleted the search, ashamed of the thought. But across town, Ethan sat in his penthouse, staring at the same gala photo of her online, the same sadness behind her smile. Neither of them knew that within 3 weeks, she would be fighting for her life in a dark lake. The bar on Park Avenue was the kind of place where secrets were traded between sips of whiskey and quiet laughter. A low jazz tune hummed under the murmur of wealthy voices. Victor sat in the corner booth, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, eyes restless. Across from him sat Ava Nguyen, 31, stunning, confident, a woman who knew how to read weakness and turn it into leverage. She stirred her martini slowly, her Cartier bracelet catching the light. "You look tired, Vic," she said with a teasing smile. "Or maybe guilty?" Victor smirked, leaning back. "You make guilt sound romantic." He reached for his glass. "I just need to breathe, that's all. Lana's suffocating me with all this baby talk and drama. She doesn't understand what I'm building." Ava tilted her head. "She's holding you back. You said it yourself." Her tone was calm, coaxing, like a therapist manipulating a confession. "You deserve freedom. You deserve me." He hesitated. "You don't get it, Ava. If I walk away, she takes everything. The sympathy, the apartment, the investors. She's the face of my family man image. Without that, I lose half the trust I've built." Ava smiled knowingly, sliding a folder across the table. "Then we fix it." Inside were printed pages, insurance policies, property records, and a glossy brochure of a private rental in the Hamptons. "You take her there for a weekend, romantic, quiet. Accidents happen, Victor. Docks get slippery. People fall. It's tragic, but not suspicious." He looked up sharply. "You're crazy." "Am I?" she asked, sipping her drink. "You've told me yourself how tired you are of pretending. She's pregnant, emotional, always crying. What kind of life is that? You said you wanted a future with me. Well, here it is, clean, quick, and profitable." He laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You're talking about murder." "I'm talking about freedom," she whispered. "And money. The policy pays out $5 million. No questions asked. You can pay off the firm's debts. We can start over. Maybe even go public next year. I'll handle the PR, the narrative, the tears." Victor stared at her, pulse hammering in his throat. He wanted to walk away, but the vision of Ava's world, glamorous, unburdened, pulled him in like gravity. Lana's swollen belly flashed in his mind, followed by Ava's bare shoulder brushing his hand. "You make it sound easy," he muttered. She leaned closer, her perfume wrapping around him like a net. "It is. Just one wrong step, one slip. The papers will call it a tragedy, I'll make sure of it." Victor looked down at the folder again. At the bottom, in neat handwriting, Ava had written, "Love demands courage." He closed it, eyes dark. "You really think no one will know?" Ava smiled. "Accidents don't leave witnesses." At the bar, the young associate from Victor's company, Mark, sat 2 tables away nursing a drink. He had come to drop off documents but froze when he heard the word insurance. His phone trembled as he hit record discreetly, catching fragments. Doc, slip, pregnant, freedom. Ava reached across the table, placing her hand over Victor's. "You won't regret this. I'll handle the reservations, the timing, everything. You just make sure she trusts you enough to close her eyes." He nodded slowly, voice barely audible. "She already does." They left the bar together, hand in hand, disappearing into the drizzle of city lights. Mark watched them go, heart pounding, uncertain whether to speak up or stay silent. He replayed the audio once, hearing Ava's chilling calm. "Docks get slippery. People fall." Outside, Victor hailed a cab for Ava, kissed her quickly, and stood watching as it vanished down the street. He pulled out his phone, opened his messages to Lana and typed, "Surprise trip next weekend, baby. Just us and the water." He stared at the words for a long moment before pressing send. Across town, Lana smiled at the message, while a storm began to form far beyond her understanding. Ethan Park lived in a world built on logic, precision, and numbers. His days were filled with board meetings, stock reports, and quiet success. Yet beneath the polished marble floors of his Park Avenue penthouse, silence haunted him. He was a man who had everything, except peace. That morning, he sat by the window with a Starbucks coffee in one hand and a worn paperback of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius in the other. Outside, the Manhattan skyline shimmered in pale gold light. His assistant had just left after dropping off the latest quarterly reports. He read the same sentence 3 times without absorbing it. His mind kept drifting to the photo he'd seen online, a charity gala, Lana Trun in a cream silk dress, her hand resting protectively on her belly. The caption read, "Victor and Lana Trun attend the Grand Sterling Charity Ball." Her smile looked almost real, but Ethan recognized the exhaustion behind her eyes. He had seen that same look once, years ago, when they were college debate partners and she'd stayed up all night studying to pay for tuition. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. A message from his security chief, Ben Carter. "Not urgent, but you might want to see this. Victor Trun's company just filed a suspicious insurance policy on his wife last month. $5 million accidental death coverage, effective immediately." Ethan frowned. He didn't like coincidences. "Flag it," he texted back. "Don't interfere yet." Ben replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. He closed the book and leaned back. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of the city far below. He looked at the Mont Blanc pen on his desk, the one Lana had given him after their final college competition. She'd said, "You'll sign something important with this one day." He hadn't known how true that would become. Later that afternoon, Ethan walked along the East River near the River Cafe, a small sanctuary where he often went to think. The smell of roasted coffee beans and rain mixed in the air. His driver, James, waited by the curb beside a gleaming black Mercedes S-Class. Ethan carried his Kindle under one arm, scrolling through financial headlines, but the world of money felt distant. He couldn't shake the unease pressing against his ribs. He passed a couple laughing on a bench, a reminder of everything fleeting. He thought about Lana again, her kindness, the way she used to share her last dollar for coffee during exams. How she once said, "Success without warmth feels like marble floors in winter." Back then, he had wanted to tell her how he felt, but she was already falling for Victor, the charming graduate student who talked about ambition and empire. Now, Victor was a man with too much power and too little conscience. Ethan didn't know the details yet, but he sensed something dangerous brewing. He opened his phone and scrolled through old photos, landing on one from graduation day. Lana smiling, holding her diploma, sunlight in her hair. He whispered under his breath, "Where are you really, Lana?" That evening, Ben called again. "Boss, that guy's moving funds, offshore accounts, multiple aliases, and there's a rental property in the Hamptons booked under his assistant's name for next weekend. Ethan's hand froze over the desk. "Send me the address," he said quietly. Ben hesitated. "You think something's going to happen?" Ethan stared out the window at the fading skyline. "I don't think," he said. "I feel it." He added the location to his calendar, labeling it Lake Meeting, Personal. When his driver asked the next morning if he wanted to take the highway, Ethan shook his head. "No. The back roads. I need quiet." A storm was forming somewhere over the Hudson, gray clouds gathering like a warning. And while Victor planned his perfect crime, Ethan Park unknowingly drove toward the night that would change everything. The morning of the trip began with sunlight spilling through the tall windows of the Trun apartment overlooking Central Park. Lana stood by the crib she'd been assembling all week, smoothing the baby blanket with careful hands. The gentle rhythm of the city below usually comforted her, but today something felt off. Too quiet, too calm. Victor's sudden kindness over the past few days only deepened the unease. He'd brought her flowers, made breakfast, even hummed while tying his tie. It all felt rehearsed. "Pack something light," he said from the doorway, buttoning his crisp white shirt. "The lake house has a view you'll love." "The lake house?" she asked, confused. "You never mentioned a trip." "I wanted to surprise you," he replied smoothly, flashing that practiced smile. "A little baby moon before everything changes." She hesitated. Her instincts whispered no, but his tone left no room for argument. She smiled weakly and folded her maternity dress into the suitcase. Inside, she tucked her worn copy of Atomic Habits, the one she planned to read after the baby arrived. "Just us?" she asked softly. "Just us," he lied. Hours later, the silver Mercedes rolled out of Manhattan, sunlight glinting off its polished hood. The city gave way to trees and open sky. Lana leaned her head against the window, watching the blur of green, trying to believe this was a peace offering. Victor's hand rested loosely on the wheel, his phone buzzing every few minutes. Each time, he silenced it. At a gas station outside the city, he stepped out to fill the tank. Lana reached for his phone, left on the dashboard. It was locked. She sighed, staring at her reflection in the screen. The baby kicked again, and she smiled faintly, whispering, "We'll be okay." Victor returned, tossing a bottle of water into her lap. "Thirsty?" "Thanks," she said. As he paid inside, she noticed another car pulling up at the far pump, a black SUV with tinted windows. A woman in large sunglasses sat in the passenger seat. The driver turned slightly, and Lana caught a glimpse of the woman's red nails tapping the dashboard. Her stomach tightened. The nails looked familiar. Ava's nails. Victor came back with a plaid blanket and a nylon cord in a shopping bag. "They said it might get chilly by the lake," he explained quickly when he saw her questioning look. She nodded, pretending not to notice the tremor in his voice. They drove another hour before the GPS announced, "You've arrived at your destination." The house stood by the edge of a still lake, surrounded by whispering pines. Beautiful, peaceful, and eerily isolated. A wooden dock stretched into the water like a finger pointing toward nowhere. Lana stepped out, the scent of wet earth filling her lungs. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, almost convincing herself. Victor came behind her, wrapping his arm around her shoulder. "See? Just what we needed." He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Let's take a walk down to the dock before dinner." In the distance, across the quiet water, she thought she saw movement, a figure walking along the road above, a car parked behind him. She squinted but dismissed it. Victor guided her hand, his palm cold. "Careful, it's slippery," he said. She laughed softly. "You sound nervous." He smiled thinly. "Not nervous, just ready." Meanwhile, on that road above, Ethan's Mercedes slowed as he checked his map. "Strange," he murmured to his driver. "This is the same lake Ben sent me coordinates for." He rolled down the window. A chill wind brushed his face. He noticed another car by the tree line, the same black SUV from the city, its engine idling. "Wait here," he told his driver, eyes narrowing toward the dock. Below, Lana stood at the water's edge, her husband behind her, the rope hidden in his hand. The evening air at the lake was unnervingly still. The kind of silence that carries weight. The sun had dipped below the tree line, leaving streaks of orange and violet on the rippling water. Lana stood barefoot on the wooden dock, her white maternity dress brushing against her ankles. Victor adjusted the camera tripod he'd brought, pretending to frame perfect sunset pictures. The lie came easily. He had practiced this moment in his mind for weeks. "Hold this scarf," he said softly, handing her a strip of fabric. "I want to do something artistic, like a blindfold shot. It'll look beautiful, trust me." Lana frowned. "Victor, are you sure? I feel silly." He smiled gently. "You trust me, don't you?" She nodded, reluctant but obedient. "Of course I do." He wrapped the scarf around her eyes, his fingers lingering on her temples longer than necessary. She laughed nervously. "I can't see anything." "That's the point," he murmured. His voice was calm, but his heartbeat roared in his ears. He reached into the bag lying beside the dock, the one holding the plaid blanket and the nylon rope. He worked quickly, looping the cord around her wrists. "Victor, what are you doing?" she asked, her tone shifting from amusement to confusion. "Just making sure you don't move while I take the photo," he said, tightening the knot slightly. Her pulse quickened. "Victor, stop, you're hurting me." He froze for half a second, her words slicing through his chest like a blade. But then Ava's voice echoed in his mind. "You want your life back, don't you?" He swallowed the guilt and finished the knot. "Just stay still," he said. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Somewhere beyond the pines, thunder rolled. "I'm cold," Lana whispered. "Can we go inside?" "In a minute," Victor replied, stepping behind her. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Ava's message, "Do it now, it's getting dark." He clenched his jaw, sweat forming along his temples. "Lana," he said softly, "remember when we first met? You said love means trusting even when it's scary." She smiled faintly. "Of course. Why?" He stepped closer. "Because I need you to trust me now." And then, with one motion, he shoved her forward. Her scream ripped through the air, swallowed almost instantly by the crash of her body hitting the water. The lake erupted in ripples, the sound of struggle muffled under the rain that began to fall. Victor stood frozen, breathing hard, watching the ripples widen. He whispered to himself, "It's done." But it wasn't. "Victor," a voice shouted from the road above. "Ethan's." Victor's head snapped up. Through the fading light, he saw a man running down the slope, suit drenched, shoes slipping on mud. Ethan's driver yelled into a phone. 911. Attempted drowning at Silver Pine Lake. Panic ignited in Victor's chest. He turned to flee, but his foot caught on the bag. The rope, the scarf, everything, the evidence, scattered onto the dock. He cursed, grabbed what he could, and sprinted toward the waiting SUV where Ava stood outside, face pale. "Someone saw," he shouted. Ava's hands trembled as she climbed into the car. "Drive. Now." Down at the dock, Ethan dove without hesitation. The water hit him like ice, stealing his breath, but he pushed through it, searching blindly. He caught sight of fabric below, a flash of white, and kicked downward. His hand found Lana's arm. Her body was limp, her wrists bound. He pulled her upward with every ounce of strength he had. When they broke the surface, Lana gasped weakly, coughing water. "My baby," she whispered, voice breaking. Ethan held her close, keeping her head above the waves. "It's okay, I've got you. You're safe," he said, even though he wasn't sure either of them were. Above them, the storm unleashed its fury, rain hammering the dock. Ethan's driver waved frantically at approaching sirens in the distance. And on the opposite shore, half hidden behind the trees, a stranger raised a phone camera, recording everything, frame by frame. What had begun as a perfect crime was already unraveling. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly above Lana's hospital bed. The sterile scent of disinfectant filled the air, mixing with the faint hum of machines monitoring her heartbeat, and another, smaller one pulsing beneath it. The rhythmic sound of the fetal monitor was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her wrists were wrapped in gauze, skin raw from the rope. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the sound of the splash, the cold, the betrayal. Every breath came with a sharp ache in her ribs. Ethan sat quietly beside her, soaked clothes replaced by hospital scrubs a nurse had found for him. His usually calm face was etched with worry. He hadn't left since the ambulance arrived. Every now and then, his eyes flicked to the door, half expecting Victor to walk in, pretending concern. A nurse entered with a clipboard. "Vitals are steady. Baby's heart rate is strong," she said gently. "You're both lucky to be alive." Lana's throat tightened. "He tried to kill me," she whispered, almost as if saying it aloud would make it real. The nurse hesitated. "Do you want me to call the detective again?" Lana shook her head weakly. "Not yet." Ethan leaned forward, voice low but firm. You have to, Lana. He's not gonna stop. He'll spin this into something else. You need protection. She turned her head toward him, eyes glassy. You saw him? I saw everything, he said. The shove, the rope, the way he ran. Her lip trembled. Why, Ethan? Why would he? He cut her off gently. Because he's not the man you thought he was. The detective arrived soon after, a woman in her 40s, calm eyes, notebook in hand. Mrs. Trunn, I'm Detective Ramirez with NYPD. I know this is hard, but we need a statement while details are fresh. Can you tell me what happened? Lana hesitated. Her instinct was to protect Victor, to believe there was an explanation, but the memory of his cold voice, "You trust me, don't you?" cut through her doubt. He told me it was a surprise trip, she began, voice trembling. He blindfolded me, said it was for a photo. Then he tied my hands. I thought it was a joke. I asked him to stop. He didn't. Tears slid down her cheeks. Then he pushed me. The detective scribbled notes, then glanced at Ethan. You said you witnessed the event? He nodded. I was nearby, saw him shove her. I have dashcam footage of his SUV leaving the area. There might also be a fisherman who recorded part of it. I can help find him. Ramirez closed her notebook. We'll collect everything. For now, Mrs. Trunn, you'll stay under observation. We'll assign an officer outside your door. After she left, silence returned. The clock ticked. Lana clutched the blanket around her, whispering, He'll come for me. Ethan's gaze hardened. Not while I'm here. A nurse peeked in to check the monitors again, adjusting the IV drip. You should rest, she said softly. But Lana couldn't rest. The shadows on the walls twisted into shapes. Victor's hands, the dock, the rope. Her baby shifted inside her, a faint flutter against her palm, reminding her why she had to survive. At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Ethan reached it first. The screen glowed with a single message from an unknown number. Tell them it was an accident or you'll regret it. Ethan's jaw clenched. It's him. Lana covered her mouth, her body shaking. He knows I'm alive. Ethan took a steadying breath. Then we make sure he regrets that. Outside the window, the city was just waking, lights flickering like distant stars. In another part of town, Victor sat in a dark apartment, staring at his phone, the weight of his choices beginning to crush him. What he didn't know was that his own words would soon become the evidence that destroyed him. Morning sunlight spilled across the hospital room, pale and unforgiving. Lana sat upright, sipping lukewarm tea, trying to keep her hands from trembling. Detective Ramirez returned, followed by 2 officers carrying evidence bags. Ethan stood near the window, phone in hand, coordinating with his security team. Everything was moving fast now, too fast for Lana to catch her breath. We've already retrieved security footage from the gas station, Ramirez said, placing still images on the table. Your husband was seen purchasing rope and a blanket 2 hours before the accident. She flipped another photo. We also have video of his SUV leaving the scene. Same license plate, time-stamped within minutes of the 911 call. Lana's voice cracked. He planned it. He really planned it. Ethan stepped closer, his tone steady. He did. But we'll make sure every move he made leads back to him. The detective nodded. Mr. Park's team sent us dashcam footage from his vehicle that night. We've confirmed it matches the car that left the dock. She looked at Lana gently. You're safe here, but we need to file for an emergency restraining order immediately. Ethan pulled a folder from his leather briefcase. Already done, he said. Filed at dawn. His efficiency startled even the detective. Ramirez smiled faintly. Well, that makes my job easier. While she left to make calls, Lana turned to Ethan. Why are you helping me like this? He hesitated. Because someone should have a conscience in this story. Tears welled in her eyes. You shouldn't have to clean up my mistakes. He shook his head. Lana, loving the wrong person isn't a mistake. Staying silent after they try to kill you would be. Meanwhile, across town, Victor sat in his office, sweating under the weight of headlines flashing across his MacBook screen. Pregnant woman survives lake fall, husband questioned. His phone buzzed non-stop. Investors wanted answers. His lawyer, a man with more ego than ethics, barked through the line. Stay quiet, deny everything. We'll call it an accident. Victor slammed the laptop shut. They have nothing, he muttered to himself. But his voice wavered. He didn't know about the fisherman's recording, or the dash cam, or Ava's own messages that were already under review. Ava called next. her tone sharp. "Victor, calm down. You're making it worse. I told you to lay low." "You said there'd be no witnesses," he snapped. "Then maybe you shouldn't have done it so sloppily," she hissed. "Delete everything, now." He stared at his phone after the call, heart hammering. He began erasing texts, deleting folders, wiping data. What he didn't realize was the NYPD had already obtained a warrant to clone his phone. Every message, every photo, every word he ever typed to Ava was already backed up on the department's secure servers. Back at the hospital, Lana's mother arrived from Boston, her face pale with worry. She gripped her daughter's hand tightly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Lana's lips trembled. "I thought I could fix him. I thought he'd change." Her mother sighed, eyes filled with sorrow. "Men like that don't change. They rot." Outside the hospital, reporters gathered, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Lana refused to answer. Ethan had arranged private security to escort her and her mother to a safe apartment downtown, a property he owned under a quiet LLC. That night, as rain lashed the city, Ethan stood by the window of the safe house, watching sirens flicker in the distance. His phone buzzed again. Ben Carter's voice came through the line. "We got the full backup from Victor's phone, boss. The messages are brutal. He and Ava planned it down to the minute, and there's talk of deleting evidence tonight." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Send everything to Detective Ramirez. Don't wait until morning." Ben paused. "Already did. You should see one of the screenshots," Ava wrote. "Once she's gone, you're free." Ethan's jaw tightened. "No, she's not free," he said quietly. Across town, Ava sat alone in her luxury apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The news ticker at the bottom of her TV read, "Police widen investigation into alleged attempted murder." And in that reflection, for the first time, Ava saw her own downfall staring back. By the third day, the story had exploded across every news outlet in New York. Morning shows replayed drone footage of the lake. The headline bold and merciless: "Pregnant wife survives attempted drowning, husband under investigation." Reporters stood outside the hospital, microphones raised, while the city whispered about betrayal and greed. Lana watched it all unfold from the safe apartment Ethan had provided. A quiet space with white walls, soft lighting, and a view of the Hudson. Her mother sat beside her on the couch, holding her hand as the baby shifted restlessly in her belly. "Turn it off," Lana murmured, voice breaking. "I can't hear them say my name again." Ethan clicked the remote, muting the television. "The media will calm down soon. They always do." She looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "They're talking about me like I'm some headline, not a person." "I know," he said softly, "but the truth will outlive the noise." Down in Midtown, Victor's world was collapsing. The sleek glass tower of his real estate firm had become a fortress of gossip. Colleagues avoided eye contact, investors demanded emergency meetings, and his assistant handed him resignation letters from half the team. On his desk, his MacBook glowed with the email subject line, "Urgent, statement to the press." Ava's voice cut through the chaos on speakerphone. "You have to control the narrative, Victor. Say it was an accident. Cry if you have to." "Cry?" he snapped. "They're treating me like a murderer." "Then stop acting like one," she shot back. "If we get ahead of it, we can still save something. I'll draft a release." "Don't," his voice cracked. "No more lies." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Ava said quietly, "If you go down, Victor, I go down too." At that same hour, Detective Ramirez sat in the precinct reviewing evidence. She flipped through printed screenshots from Victor's phone, texts with Ava discussing timing and weather conditions, photos of the dock sent days before the trip, even a voice note from Ava saying, "We'll need to make sure she can't grab onto anything." Ramirez exhaled slowly. The pieces fit too perfectly. She picked up the phone. "ADA Lewis, we're ready for a warrant." Meanwhile, back at the safe apartment, a knock at the door startled Lana. 2 police officers entered, followed by Ramirez herself. "Mrs. Trunn," the detective said gently, "we're moving forward with arrests. We'll need you to review and sign an official statement tonight." Lana's fingers trembled as she held the pen. Her signature felt like a final goodbye to the illusion of her marriage. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're doing the right thing." She nodded faintly. "Then why does it still hurt?" "Because you loved him," he said quietly, "and good people always hurt longer." That night, Victor stood before his bathroom mirror, tie undone, eyes red-rimmed. His phone buzzed with a new notification. Breaking news. Police confirm investigation into Victor Trun and PR executive Ava Nguyen. He threw the phone against the wall, glass shattering across the tile. Outside his window, flashbulbs lit up the street. Reporters had found his address. The camera lenses were merciless, catching every twitch of panic on his face as he pulled the blinds closed. In her penthouse, Ava poured herself another glass of wine, watching the same broadcast. The anchor's voice echoed. Sources close to the investigation suggest multiple recordings link the suspects directly to the crime. Her hand froze midair. Recordings? She whispered. On her laptop, an anonymous email pinged into her inbox. The subject line read, "You should have deleted everything, Ava." No sender, no signature, just one attached file, an audio clip of her own voice saying, "Docs get slippery, people fall." The glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Across the city, Ethan looked out over the skyline from the safe house balcony, the wind cool against his face. "They're unraveling," he said softly to Ben over the phone. Ben chuckled. "And the world's watching every second of it." But Ethan wasn't watching for revenge. He was watching to make sure Lana finally had peace. The sound of cameras clicking echoed through the marble lobby of the Manhattan courthouse. The case everyone had whispered about for weeks was finally breaking wide open. Reporters lined the steps, microphones raised, waiting for the man at the center of it all, Victor Trun, to arrive in handcuffs. Inside, Detective Ramirez stood beside Assistant District Attorney Lewis, reviewing the evidence spread across a polished oak table. Photos, text logs, transaction receipts, audio files. It was an overwhelming mountain of proof. "This isn't just attempted murder," Ramirez said quietly. "It's premeditation, conspiracy, and fraud. They planned every inch of it." Lewis nodded. "The jury won't need long." Across town, in a penthouse that now felt like a cage, Ava Nguyen paced barefoot, her nerves unraveling. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Lawyers, journalists, old friends suddenly pretending not to know her. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the mirror, mascara smudged, her eyes hollow. "We can fix this," she muttered, as if repeating it would make it true. Victor's call came through next. His voice was ragged, panicked. "They have everything, Ava. They're coming for me." "Then we stick to the plan," she said, forcing calm. "It was an accident. You slipped. She fell. You jumped in too late." Victor's tone turned desperate. "They have my texts, the gas station video, the damn rope receipts." Ava's composure cracked. "Then you say I made you do it. You tell them I pressured you. You tell them." He cut her off. "I'm not going down alone." The line went dead. At that same moment, 2 NYPD squad cars pulled up outside her building. She looked out the window, heart pounding as blue lights reflected off the glass. "Oh God," she whispered, backing away. The doorbell rang once, sharp and final. "Miss Nguyen," a voice called through the door. "We have a warrant for your arrest." When she didn't answer, the battering ram took care of it. Meanwhile, at the courthouse, Victor was already being led inside by officers, hands cuffed, head down. The crowd erupted in a storm of shouts and flashes. "Victor, did you try to kill your wife? What do you have to say to your unborn child? Was it worth it?" He said nothing, but under the noise, a single whisper escaped his lips. "Ava." Inside the grand jury room, A.D.A. Lewis began his statement. "The people of New York present evidence of attempted murder in the second degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice." The room fell silent as the first piece of footage played. Victor at the gas station buying the rope. The timestamp matched the day of the trip. Then came the audio file. Ava's voice saying, "Accidents happen. Just make sure she can't reach the dock." The jurors looked sickened. One woman covered her mouth. By noon, the indictment was unanimous. At the hospital, Lana watched the news broadcast on a small television, her mother holding her hand. Her body still felt fragile, but her spirit had hardened. She whispered, "He's finally facing what he did." Ethan stood by the window, silent. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. Justice wasn't joy, it was survival. Later that afternoon, Detective Ramirez arrived to update her. "They've both been indicted. Victor's in custody. Ava's being transferred from the 19th precinct. The DA's office wants you to rest. You'll testify when you're ready." Lana nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I just want to protect my baby." "You already did," Ramirez said softly. "You fought to live. That's more than most." Outside the courthouse, as Victor was escorted into the holding van, rain began to fall. Cold, steady, merciless. The cameras kept flashing, freezing him in that moment forever. The man who traded love for greed and lost everything. Ethan turned off the TV and looked at Lana, who sat quietly with her hands over her stomach. "It's over," he said gently, but she shook her head. "Not yet. I still have to face him in court." He met her eyes. "Then I'll be sitting right behind you when you do." And for the first time since the lake, she finally believed she would survive this storm. The days following the indictment were chaos. Every news channel had a version of the story, every gossip blog twisted it further. But what hurt most was how Victor and Ava fought back. Not in court yet, but online. A coordinated smear campaign began, spreading like wildfire through social media. Anonymous accounts appeared overnight, accusing Lana of faking her pregnancy, of blackmailing her husband, of being mentally unstable. Comments flooded every post with cruelty disguised as curiosity. Hashtags trended: gold-digging wife, set up for money. The internet, always hungry for scandal, devoured it all. Inside the safe apartment, Lana sat at the dining table, phone in hand, scrolling despite knowing she shouldn't. Her eyes stung. "They're calling me a liar," she whispered, voice hollow. "They're saying I did this for attention." Ethan reached across the table and gently took the phone from her. "Don't give them power," he said softly. "They feed on pain. You don't owe the world your truth. It's already in the evidence." Her mother, sitting nearby, knitting tiny socks for the baby, sighed heavily. "They can say what they want. The truth doesn't vanish because people can't handle it." But Ethan wasn't calm inside. He'd seen this kind of digital warfare before. Weaponized reputation designed to destroy victims before trial. He called his head of security, Ben Carter, whose background in cybersecurity had saved Ethan's company more than once. "I need you to trace the origin of those accounts," Ethan ordered. "Find out who's funding this." Ben chuckled darkly. "You already know the answer, but don't worry, I'll confirm it." Meanwhile, in a conference room on the upper floor of a downtown PR agency, Ava sat at the head of the table, flanked by two spin doctors she'd paid with what little cash she had left. "We need to flood the internet with noise," she said coldly. "If people doubt her, the jury will too." One of the consultants frowned. "Ava, the DA's case is airtight. Smearing the victim could backfire." "Just do it," she snapped. "I know how this game works." Victor joined via video call from his lawyer's office, looking thinner, angrier. "You'd better make this work. I'm not spending my life in prison because of you." Ava's jaw tightened. "You're not innocent either, Victor. You pushed her. I just gave you the idea." His lawyer cut in sharply. "This conversation is not protected. I advise you both to." Victor hung up. Back at the safe house, Ben returned with results faster than expected. "Boss, the fake accounts were created through an offshore marketing firm in Singapore. Guess who signed the retainer?" Ethan's face hardened. "Ava Nguyen." Lana looked at him, disbelief clouding her face. "Even now, after everything?" "She's desperate," Ethan replied. "She's drowning, and she's trying to pull you down with her." That evening, Ethan's communications team quietly contacted every major platform, presenting proof of defamation. Within hours, the accounts began to disappear one by one. The truth started crawling back into the light. The next morning, a surprise twist hit the news cycle. A local fisherman who'd recorded the lake incident anonymously posted his video online. It showed everything: the shove, the splash, the panic. Within minutes, it went viral. Public opinion flipped almost instantly. Comments flooded in. "That poor woman. He really tried to kill her. Justice for Lana." For the first time in weeks, Lana saw kindness filling her feed. She covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "People believe me now," she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs time. But even as hope returned, a quiet knock came at the door. When Ethan opened it, a courier handed him an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a note written in block letters. "There's more you need to see." He looked at Lana, his expression darkening. Someone's still talking. And in that moment, they both realized the real war hadn't ended. It was only changing form. The night was thick with rain, the kind that made the city glow in reflections. Inside the safe house, the storm outside felt like an echo of the one building within. Ethan sat at the dining table, the mysterious flash drive resting in his palm. It was small, silver, ordinary, yet somehow it pulsed with tension, as if it carried the weight of truth. Lana stood beside him, her hands folded over her stomach. "What if it's something dangerous?" she asked softly. Ethan met her eyes. Truth is always dangerous to people who lie. He plugged the drive into his laptop. For a moment, the screen stayed black. Then a single folder appeared, labeled Project Clearwater. He clicked it open. Several audio files filled the screen, each named with a date, spanning weeks before the attack. He hit play. Ava's voice spilled from the speakers, crisp and cold. "You can't make it look too clean. The insurance company will flag it. It has to feel like an accident, panic, chaos, emotion. That's what sells." Then Victor's voice replied, shaky but determined. "She's pregnant, Ava. People will ask questions." "Then you say she slipped," Ava answered. "You jumped in, tried to save her. If she lives, we spin her as unstable. If she doesn't." There was a pause, followed by the faint clinking of glasses. "We both win." Lana gasped, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They recorded themselves." Ethan leaned forward, jaw tightening. They planned every detail. He opened the next file. "Ava again. Make sure she doesn't have her phone. No signal out there. You don't want her calling for help before it's over." Ethan froze the playback. "That's premeditation. It's over for them." Ben Carter, who had arrived moments earlier, let out a low whistle. "Whoever gave you this wanted to make sure they both burn." Lana turned toward him. "Who could it be?" Ben shrugged. "Maybe someone inside their circle. Maybe guilt finally caught up." Ethan copied the files to an encrypted folder. "We'll hand this directly to Detective Ramirez. Chain of custody has to be perfect." Lana nodded but couldn't stop trembling. I can still hear her voice, so calm, like killing me was just another business meeting. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "You survived them. That's what they didn't plan for." Across the city, Ava sat in her apartment, pacing in her robe, wine glass half full. She didn't know yet about the flash drive, but she could feel something slipping. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered, voice sharp. "Who is this?" A distorted voice replied, "You thought no one was listening. You were wrong." Then the line went dead. Her stomach turned cold. She checked her email and froze, an attachment from an anonymous address. It was one of the very recordings she had made, her own voice, her own crime. "No," she whispered, backing away from the laptop as if it were alive. "No, no, no." Meanwhile, Ethan and Lana drove to the precinct through the rain, the flash drive locked in his briefcase. Detective Ramirez met them in her office, hair pulled into a tight bun, coffee in hand. Ethan placed the device on her desk. "It's all there. Voices, dates, everything. This ends tonight." Ramirez plugged it in, listened briefly, then leaned back. "This isn't just evidence. It's confession." Lana sat quietly, staring at the raindrops streaking the window. "Do you think they'll finally stop lying?" Ramirez gave a grim smile. "People like that never stop lying, but now their lies have tape." By midnight, the DA's office filed for a supplementary charge, attempted murder with premeditation. Warrants expanded. Detectives moved fast, raiding Ava's apartment before she could destroy her electronics. When they cuffed her, she didn't fight. She just whispered, "Who sent it?" No one answered. Back at the safe house, Lana finally allowed herself to breathe. Ethan closed his laptop and turned to her. "It's over now," he said softly. But Lana, staring into the storm, shook her head. "For them, maybe. For me, it's just beginning." And outside, thunder rolled like applause for the truth finally breaking free. The courthouse smelled faintly of wood polish and tension. Journalists crowded the marble steps outside, umbrellas flashing like dark wings in the drizzle. Inside, the courtroom buzzed, reporters whispering, lawyers shuffling papers, 1,000 eyes fixed on the front row where Lana sat. Her belly, now full and round, pressed gently against her pale maternity dress. The child inside her was due any week, a living reminder of what she'd fought to protect. Ethan sat 2 rows behind her, posture calm, eyes steady. He was there not as a billionaire this time, but as her witness, her silent anchor. The hum of the air conditioning filled the room as Judge Keaton entered, his gavel echoing like thunder. "This court is now in session. The people versus Victor Trun and Ava Nguyen." Lana's heart thudded painfully in her chest. This was it, the moment she dreaded and needed in equal measure. The prosecutor, Ada Lewis, rose from his table, buttoning his navy suit. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, voice measured but piercing. This is not a case of misfortune. It is a case of calculation. It is a case of betrayal, greed, and a husband who decided his wife's life was worth less than his ambition. He paused, letting silence hang heavy. You will hear the recordings. You will see the rope. You will witness how two people tried to erase a woman and how she refused to disappear. The jury nodded subtly, faces grave. Victor avoided eye contact, dressed in a wrinkled gray suit that no longer fit his arrogance. Beside him, Ava looked smaller than ever. Her perfect posture wilted. She kept her eyes on the table, trembling fingers clutching a tissue she didn't use. The first witnesses were technical experts, police analysts, insurance agents, and the fisherman who had captured the video. The courtroom watched in breathless silence as the grainy footage played. Lana blindfolded, Victor standing behind her, the shove, the splash, the frantic struggle. Lana covered her mouth, tears streaming freely as she heard herself scream on the recording. Ethan's fists tightened in his lap, knuckles white. When the prosecutor asked the fisherman to identify the man in the footage, he pointed without hesitation. "That's him," he said, his voice firm. "That's Victor Trun." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Next came the audio recordings from the flash drive. Ava's voice echoed through the speakers, sharp and icy. "Accidents sell better. Just make sure she can't grab onto anything." The jurors exchanged horrified glances. One woman reached for her tissue. Then finally, the clerk called. "The people call Lana Trun to the stand." The courtroom fell silent. Lana rose slowly, each step heavy but resolute. She took the oath with shaking hands, then sat down. The prosecutor smiled gently. "Mrs. Trun, can you tell the court what happened on the night of May 12th? Her voice trembled at first, but steadied as she spoke. "He said it was a surprise trip. He told me to close my eyes. I trusted him. I thought he loved me." Her voice cracked, but she continued. "When I felt the rope, I knew something was wrong. I begged him to stop. He didn't." Victor looked up for the first time, his eyes wet, but Lana didn't look back. "He pushed me," she said simply. "I remember the water. I remember thinking about my baby and realizing I couldn't die yet." When she finished, the courtroom was silent, except for the quiet hum of the air vents. The defense attorney stood, adjusting his tie. "Mrs. Trun," he began coolly, "isn't it true your husband tried to save you?" Lana stared at him, unflinching. "If he tried to save me," she said softly, "why did he bring the rope?" The question hit like lightning. The courtroom murmured. The judge pounded the gavel for order. Ethan exhaled, pride and grief tangled in his chest. As Lana stepped down from the stand, ADA Lewis met her eyes and nodded. "You did beautifully," he whispered. But as she returned to her seat, she noticed Ava watching her, eyes hollow, mascara streaking. There was no hatred there anymore, only fear. And for the first time, Lana realized the truth didn't just punish, it haunted. The second week of trial began under gray skies. Reporters stood outside the courthouse, their breath fogging in the morning air. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Inside, the courtroom was packed again, every seat filled, every camera pointed toward the defense table where Victor and Ava sat like ghosts of their former selves. Victor wore a dark suit that hung loose on his shoulders. The arrogance that once defined him had dissolved into exhaustion. Ava, in a pale blazer, clutched a rosary she didn't believe in. The murmur of the crowd died as Judge Keaton entered, the gavel echoing sharp and final. "Court is in session." The prosecutor, ADA Lewis, rose first. "The people call Victor Trun." A hush fell. Even the air seemed to thicken. Victor stood slowly, adjusting his tie with trembling fingers, then took the stand. His lawyer gave him an encouraging nod, but his eyes darted nervously toward the jury box. Lewis approached the witness stand with calm precision. "Mr. Trun," he began, "you were married to the victim, correct?" "Yes." Victor's voice was barely audible. "And on May 12th, you traveled to Silver Pine Lake with your wife?" "Yes." "Why?" Victor cleared his throat. We needed time together. Things had been tense. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway." Lewis nodded slowly. "Romantic," he repeated. "So romantic you brought rope?" Victor froze. "That wasn't. It was for the car. The trunk latch was loose." The prosecutor's eyebrow arched. "For the car? The same rope tied around your wife's wrists?" A ripple of laughter broke from the gallery, quickly silenced by the judge. Victor swallowed hard. "I didn't tie her that tightly. She could have freed herself." Lewis stepped closer. voice calm but deadly. She was 7 months pregnant, Mr. Trun. Tell us, how was she supposed to free herself while blindfolded in the dark underwater? Victor's jaw clenched. It was an accident. The prosecutor pressed play on an audio file from the flash drive. Ava's voice filled the courtroom. Make sure she can't grab onto anything. Victor flinched. His lawyer jumped up. Objection. Context. The judge waved it off, overruled. Lewis leaned in. Still sound like an accident to you? Victor looked at Ava, but she refused to meet his gaze. Panic flared behind his eyes. She told me to do it, he shouted suddenly. Ava planned everything. She said it'd be easy, that no one would know. The room erupted in whispers. Ava shot to her feet. Liar, she screamed, tears streaking her face. You begged me to help you. You said she ruined your life. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. Order. Lana sat frozen in the front row, her heart pounding. Watching them tear each other apart was both vindicating and unbearable. Lewis folded his hands. So which is it, Mr. Trun? Were you the mastermind or the puppet? Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. Both. The prosecutor nodded. At least you're honest about that. Next, Ava was called to the stand. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Miss Nguyen, Lewis began, how long had you been romantically involved with Mr. Trun? She hesitated. 2 years. And during those 2 years, did you discuss eliminating his wife? Her voice cracked. Not seriously, it was just talk. Talk that turned into planning, correct? She didn't answer. Lewis played another recording, her voice saying, if she doesn't come back, we both win. Ava broke down. He said he'd leave her. I didn't think he'd actually do it. The prosecutor crossed his arms. So you didn't think your plan for an accident might actually hurt someone? The defense attorney objected again, but the damage was done. Ava buried her face in her hands, sobbing. From the jury box, a man whispered, they're both guilty. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all morning finally broke. Rain pounded the windows, the sound almost drowning out the noise inside. Lana leaned against Ethan's shoulder, whispering, they're turning on each other. Ethan nodded slowly. That's what guilt does. It eats itself alive. And on the stand, as thunder cracked above the courthouse, both conspirators finally began to crumble under the weight of their own lies. The final day of the trial dawned clear and bright. The city washed clean after nights of relentless rain. Outside the Manhattan courthouse, the air buzzed with anticipation. Crowds gathered early, lining the sidewalks with cameras and signs that read, Justice for Lana. Reporters murmured updates into microphones, while police set up barricades to control the flood of people. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than ever. The jury filed in silently, their faces unreadable. Lana sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly around a handkerchief. Ethan was behind her, his quiet presence steadying her, as always. The baby inside her moved softly, as if sensing the weight of the moment. Judge Keaton took his seat, gavel striking once. This court will now reconvene for the reading of the verdict. The air thickened. Every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of papers, the click of a pen, the faint creak of a chair. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with calm eyes, stood and handed a folded piece of paper to the bailiff. The bailiff passed it to the judge, who unfolded it slowly. In the case of the People versus Victor Trun, he read, his voice steady, on the charge of attempted murder in the 2nd degree, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Victor's head dropped, his face drained of color. His lawyer whispered something urgently, but he didn't move. The judge continued, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. A few reporters outside could be heard shouting through the windows, their voices echoing faintly against the glass. Judge Keaton shifted his gaze. In the case of the People versus Ava Nguyen, on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, guilty. Ava began to cry, a sound raw and childlike. She whispered something to herself, clutching the rosary tighter until it snapped in her hands. The judge looked to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service. You are dismissed. Then he turned to the defendants. Sentencing will be scheduled within 30 days. Victor stood abruptly. Wait, he shouted. I didn't mean to kill her. It was a mistake. The judge's gavel came down hard. Enough, Mr. Trun. You've spoken enough. Officers stepped forward, taking his arms. Ava reached for him as they led her in the opposite direction. "Victor," she cried, "you said we'd survive this." He didn't look back. As the courtroom began to clear, Lana remained seated. Tears slid silently down her face, but they weren't tears of grief, they were tears of release. She had survived the unimaginable. She had spoken the truth and lived to hear justice pronounced. Ethan stepped forward, kneeling beside her. "It's over," he said softly. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "No, Ethan, it's finally beginning," he smiled faintly. "Then we start new." Reporters waited outside as she exited through the courthouse steps, escorted by officers and surrounded by flashing cameras. Microphones shoved forward. "Lana, do you have anything to say?" She paused for a moment, hand resting on her belly, and answered clearly, "No one has the right to decide who deserves to live. My child and I were proof that love and courage are stronger than fear." Applause broke out among the crowd, spontaneous and raw. Someone shouted, "We love you, Lana." As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting gold across her face. For the first time in months, she lifted her head without shame, without fear. Behind her, Ethan watched quietly, a faint smile in his eyes. He didn't see a victim anymore. He saw a woman reborn. Inside the courthouse, Judge Keaton gathered his papers and sighed to the clerk beside him. "Justice is slow," he murmured, "but today, it worked." And outside, as the crowd's cheers rose over the city's hum, Lana finally felt the sound of freedom in her lungs. A gray winter morning settled over Manhattan when sentencing day arrived. The air outside the courthouse carried a sharp wind, cutting through coats and scarves, but inside the heat was stifling, heavy with expectation. Reporters lined the corridors again, cameras ready, whispering predictions about how many years Victor and Ava would serve. Some said 20, some said life. Lana walked slowly through the hallway, escorted by Ethan and Detective Ramirez. She wore a simple cream dress and a small silver cross around her neck, a gift from her mother. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried quiet fire. This was not vengeance. This was closure. The courtroom was full once more. At the front, Victor sat in shackles, his once polished shoes scuffed, his suit rumpled. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear, but Victor didn't respond. He stared straight ahead, hollow and pale, like a man already buried under the weight of his sins. Beside him, Ava sat trembling, clutching a crumpled tissue. Her beauty, once her weapon, had become a fragile mask that could no longer hide her guilt. Judge Keaton entered, his robe sweeping the floor. The murmurs died instantly. "We are here to deliver sentencing in the People versus Victor Trun and Ava Nguyen," he announced, his voice solemn but firm. ADA Lewis stood. "Your Honor, the prosecution asks for the maximum sentence permitted under law. The evidence shows not only premeditation but callous disregard for human life and for the life of an unborn child. This was not a moment of madness, it was strategy." The judge nodded gravely. "The court recognizes the severity." He turned his gaze toward Victor. "Mr. Trun, do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" Victor stood slowly, hands shaking. "Your Honor, I don't know what to say anymore." His voice cracked. "I loved her once. I swear I did. I just wanted freedom. I thought if she was gone, everything would get easier. But I was wrong. I destroyed everything." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Keaton leaned forward. "You didn't destroy everything, Mr. Trun. You destroyed yourself." Then he looked to Ava. "Ms. Nguyen?" Ava rose unsteadily, mascara streaking her cheeks. "I didn't push her. I never touched her," she said weakly. "But I didn't stop him either. I told myself it wasn't real, that he'd never go through with it. I was wrong. I'm sorry." The judge's gavel struck once. "Sorry doesn't bring back trust, Miss Nguyen. It doesn't erase the scars on this woman's hands or the nightmares that will follow her child's birth." He took a deep breath and read from the sentencing order. For the defendant Victor Trun, 25 years in state prison, no possibility of parole for 18. For the defendant Ava Nguyen, 15 years in state prison, parole eligible after 10. A collective sigh filled the room. Half relief, half disbelief. Victor bowed his head as officers moved to escort him out. Ava began to cry openly, reaching for him, but he didn't turn around. Lana sat motionless, her hands pressed over her stomach, whispering something only she and her unborn child could hear. Ethan, seated beside her, caught the faintest words. "It's over, baby. We're safe." After court adjourned, the reporters swarmed the courthouse steps again. Ethan guided Lana through the crowd, shielding her from the flashes and questions. "Mrs. Trunn, what do you think of the sentence?" someone shouted. Lana paused for a moment and looked toward the sky. "Justice isn't revenge," she said softly. "It's knowing the truth finally spoke louder than lies." That evening, in a cold concrete cell, Victor sat on his cot, staring at the gray wall. Somewhere down the corridor, a guard's radio played the evening news, his own name echoing faintly. He clenched his fists, whispering bitterly, "Ava set me up." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. He had set himself up long before the lake. In another cell across the facility, Ava curled into her blanket, tears soaking the pillow. She whispered prayers she didn't believe in, hoping silence would drown out the sound of her own guilt. Back in the city, Lana finally allowed herself to rest. She stood by the window of the safe apartment, the Manhattan skyline glowing gold in the distance. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of tea. "They're gone," he said quietly. Lana nodded. "And tomorrow I start living again." And for the first time in months, her heart felt light enough to believe she truly could. The hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender air freshener. It was dawn, the hour when the world is quietest, holding its breath before life begins again. Lana lay in the maternity suite, pale but radiant, her hair damp against her forehead. Her contractions had started hours earlier, slow and steady, but now they came stronger, closer, sharper. Each wave of pain felt like another piece of fear leaving her body. Outside her window, the Manhattan skyline glowed with the first blush of sunrise. The storm of her life was finally over. The world felt clean again. Ethan sat beside her bed, his hand wrapped around hers. His tailored shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, but he refused to leave. "Breathe with me," he said softly, his voice steady. "In through your nose, out through your mouth." Lana followed his rhythm. Between breaths, she whispered, "I'm scared." "You've survived worse," he said gently. "This is the part where everything begins." A nurse entered, adjusting the monitors. The steady beeping of the fetal heart rate filled the room, reassuring and constant. "You're doing beautifully, sweetheart," the nurse said. "We're almost there." Lana closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. In her mind, flashes of the lake returned. The cold water, the rope, the darkness. But now, those memories no longer held power. They were ghosts fading in daylight. She had made it through the worst night of her life, and now she was bringing new life into the world. Ethan brushed the hair from her face. "You know," he murmured, trying to make her smile, "you're tougher than half the CEOs I deal with. Maybe more." She laughed weakly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Hours passed in fragments. Voices, footsteps, the hum of machines. When the pain became unbearable, Lana squeezed Ethan's hand so tightly he winced, but he never pulled away. "You're okay," he whispered over and over like a mantra. Finally, the doctor appeared, gloves on, voice calm and clear. "All right, Lana, one last push." The room seemed to stop. Time collapsed into a single heartbeat, a single breath, a single moment that stretched forever. And then a cry. A small, perfect sound that broke through everything. Past trauma, past pain, past fear. A baby's first cry, sharp and beautiful. Lana sobbed, her body shaking as the doctor lifted the newborn and placed him gently on her chest. The baby's tiny hands clenched, his skin pink and warm. He blinked up at her, as if recognizing the voice that had whispered to him through months of chaos. "Hi, my love," Lana whispered, tears streaming. "You're safe now." Ethan turned away for a moment, swallowing hard. When he looked back, his eyes were wet. "He's perfect," he said softly. The nurse smiled. "Would the father like to cut the cord?" Lana hesitated. The question hung in the air. Ethan froze, unsure what to say. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes full of gratitude and something unspoken. "Yes," she said finally, "he would." Ethan blinked, startled. "Lana," she nodded gently, "you saved both of us. You're part of this story too." His hands trembled as he took the scissors. One clean snip and the moment became eternal. Later, as the room quieted and the nurse dimmed the lights, Lana lay with her son asleep on her chest. She whispered his name softly, a name that meant light after storm. Ethan sat in the corner, watching, his heart full in a way he'd never known. The city outside was waking up, golden light spreading over the skyline. "Ethan," Lana said, her voice barely a whisper, "thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He smiled faintly. It wasn't faith, Lana. It was the truth. You were always stronger than what tried to break you. She looked down at her son, then back at him. Maybe now, we both get to start over. And in that quiet hospital room under a soft sunrise, the woman who had once been left for dead brought life into the world, and finally, peace into her own heart. 2 months after the trial, the city had begun to bloom again. Cherry blossoms lined the edges of Central Park, their petals drifting through the air like slow pink snow. Lana walked along the winding path near the lake, pushing a small stroller. Her son, Eli, slept peacefully beneath a soft blue blanket. The world felt still for the first time in years. Ethan walked beside her, carrying 2 coffees from a nearby cafe. He handed one to her, the cup warm against her palm. "Half-sweet vanilla latte," he said. "Still your favorite?" She smiled. "You remembered." "I remember everything," he said softly, but then looked away before the weight of his words could hang too long. They stopped by a bench overlooking the water. The same lake, but a different one somehow. The same world, but reborn. Lana sat, watching the ripples shimmer in the sunlight. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think this place would haunt me forever, but now it feels different, like it's been washed clean." Ethan nodded. "Pain does that. It burns everything down until only truth is left." She looked at him then, really looked at him, the calm strength, the quiet eyes that had seen her broken and never turned away. "You never asked for anything," she said, "not once." He chuckled lightly. "You think I helped you expecting something?" "No," she said, smiling gently. "That's why I trust you." A breeze stirred the water, scattering petals across the surface. For a while, they sat in silence. Birds called somewhere in the distance. The world seemed to hold its breath again. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't open it right away. He just held it in his palm, turning it over thoughtfully. "I bought this a week after the sentencing," he said. "Then I told myself I'd wait, that maybe you needed time to find your own ground before anyone tried to stand next to you." Lana's heartbeat quickened. "Ethan?" He shook his head, smiling gently. "Relax. It's not a proposal. Not yet." He opened the box. Inside wasn't a ring, but a delicate Tiffany locket, silver, heart-shaped, engraved with a single word, resilience. "It's got space for 2 photos," he said. "I thought maybe one for Eli, and one for whoever helped you remember what strength looks like when you forget." Her eyes filled with tears. "You," he shrugged, "or your mom, or whoever deserves it that day. It's yours to decide." She took the locket, tracing her thumb over the engraving. "It's beautiful." "You're beautiful," he said quietly. The words slipped out before he could stop them. She looked at him, the emotion in her eyes soft but steady. "You know," she said, "everyone kept calling you my savior. But you didn't save me, Ethan. You just reminded me I was worth saving." He smiled, his throat tight. "That's all I ever wanted." Eli stirred in the stroller, letting out a tiny sigh, and they both laughed softly. "Guess he agrees?" Ethan said. Lana tucked the blanket closer around her baby. "He's going to grow up knowing what love really means. Not the kind that hurts or controls, but the kind that stays." Ethan leaned back on the bench, watching the light dance across the water. "Then I'd say you've already given him more than most people ever get." A notification buzzed on Ethan's phone. A news alert. Victor Trun's appeal denied. Sentence upheld. He silenced it without comment and slid the phone back into his pocket. Lana caught the motion, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she said softly, "Good. Now I can stop looking over my shoulder." He nodded. "You can start looking forward." She smiled, eyes glistening, "and maybe see what's standing right in front of me." The air between them shifted, gentle, full, alive. He reached for her hand but didn't force it. She didn't pull away. And there, by the water that once nearly took her life, Lana began to believe in love again, not as rescue, but as rebirth. 6 months later, Manhattan shimmered under late summer sunlight. The streets hummed with energy, taxis honking, life pulsing through every block. But for Lana, the city felt quieter now, gentler. She stood by the window of her new apartment, holding Eli against her chest as morning light painted gold streaks across the hardwood floor. He was growing fast. Bright eyes, tiny fists, laughter that filled the silence she once feared. The apartment wasn't grand, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline. A soft rug spread across the living room where a few toys lay scattered. A MacBook Pro sat open on the marble kitchen island, beside a half-empty mug of coffee. A framed photo of Lana and Ethan rested nearby, taken at Central Park, her smile genuine, no shadows behind it this time. Ethan arrived a few minutes later, letting himself in with a gentle knock. He carried a paper bag from a small bakery on Fifth Avenue. "Still like almond croissants?" he asked. Lana turned, smiling. "You remembered again." "I'm good at remembering the small things," he said, setting the bag down. He leaned over to tickle Eli's tiny foot. The baby gurgled happily. "He's getting huge." "Tell me about it," Lana laughed. "He doesn't stop eating or smiling." "That's a good sign," Ethan said softly. "He's learning from you." They sat at the dining table, sunlight spilling between them. Lana watched Ethan carefully, noticing how much calmer he seemed these days. The sharp edges of his old corporate life had softened. He still wore expensive suits, still carried his Mont Blanc pen out of habit, but there was warmth now, a kind of peace that came from purpose, not just power. "So," Ethan said after a moment, "how's the event planning going?" Lana smiled with quiet pride. "Better than I ever expected. 3 clients this week, all word of mouth. I'm finally doing something on my own." "That's exactly what you should be doing," he said. "You built your life again from ashes, Lana. That's more impressive than any CEO I've met." She blushed lightly. "It doesn't feel like rebuilding. It feels like starting from zero, but finally on my own terms." Ethan nodded. "You know, that's the best kind of success, the kind that doesn't depend on anyone else's permission." For a while, they ate in comfortable silence. The city's rhythm pulsed faintly through the window. Distant sirens, a bus rumbling past, the hum of life moving forward. After breakfast, Ethan helped her arrange a new bookshelf. As he placed a small stack of books on the top shelf, Atomic Habits, Women Who Run with the Wolves, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, he smiled. "You've got a pretty solid survival library here." Lana laughed. "Maybe I'll write my own someday. How to Rebuild Your Life After Your Husband Tries to Kill You." He chuckled. "I'd read that." As they finished, Lana stood back to admire the space. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think home was where someone loved you. But now I think it's where you finally love yourself." Ethan turned to her, his voice warm. "Then this place fits you perfectly." A quiet moment passed. The air between them felt light, almost electric. Lana reached for a framed picture on the counter. It showed her Ethan and Eli in the park, sunlight behind them. "I never thought I'd have this again," she said. "Peace, laughter, safety." Ethan's expression softened. "You earned every bit of it." He hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from his pocket. "This came for you," he said. "Certified letter from the state." Lana opened it carefully. It was an official notice. "The appeal of Victor Trun has been denied. Case closed. Sentence final." She exhaled slowly, a tear escaping before she could stop it. "Finally," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer. "It's over, Lana, completely." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "No, it's begun." He smiled, understanding. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Lana stood on the balcony holding Eli, watching the city lights flicker to life. Ethan joined her, setting 2 glasses of wine on the railing. They didn't speak for a long time. They didn't need to. Because for the first time, Lana wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. Autumn returned to New York with golden leaves and crisp air that hinted at closure. Central Park glowed under a late afternoon sun, the kind of light that makes everything look forgiven. Lana walked slowly along the familiar path, Eli toddling beside her, his tiny hands clutching fallen leaves. He giggled as the wind caught them, scattering gold across the path. 16 months had passed since the verdict, and life had settled into something that finally felt normal. Her nightmares had faded into faint echoes. The lake no longer haunted her. It had become a symbol of survival, not fear. She came here often now, not to remember the pain, but to honor the strength that grew from it. Ahead, she saw a fisherman near the water, the same man who had recorded that fateful night. His hair was grayer now, his face weathered but kind. She approached him with a warm smile. "I never really thanked you," she said. He looked up from his fishing rod, squinting against the light. "You don't have to, ma'am. Anyone would have done the same." She shook her head. "No," she said softly. "Anyone could have, but only you did." He smiled faintly and nodded. You did the hard part, though. You lived. She glanced at Eli, who was chasing a pigeon with pure joy. Yeah, she whispered. We lived. From the bridge above the lake, Ethan watched the scene quietly. He'd learned to keep his distance sometimes, to let her have her own moments. His life had changed too. The billionaire who once lived for numbers now spent his days investing in people. Women's shelters, rehabilitation programs, scholarships for survivors. He had found purpose in her courage. Lana looked up, spotting him on the bridge. She smiled and waved for him to come down. He joined her by the path, dressed simply today. Jeans, a gray sweater, nothing about him shouting money anymore. Just calm, content presence. Thought I'd find you here, he said. Some habits are worth keeping, she replied. They walked together toward a nearby bench, Eli between them, holding both their hands. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and pine. For a long while, they sat in silence, watching the lake shimmer under the setting sun. Ethan finally broke the quiet. You ever think about what comes next? Lana smiled gently. For me, it's about small things now. Eli's first steps, my next event, waking up without fear. He nodded. That's a good plan. She turned to him, eyes bright with something new, something peaceful. And you? What about your next chapter? He chuckled softly. Maybe I'll finally take a break from work. I've been thinking about moving somewhere quiet, but only if someone I care about wants to come with me. She met his gaze, heart fluttering. You mean us? He shrugged, a small, hopeful smile. If you'll have me, not as a savior, not as a replacement, but as someone who loves you exactly as you are. Her breath caught. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves across the water. She looked down at Eli, who had crawled into her lap, yawning. You know, she said softly, for the longest time, I didn't believe in second chances. And now? He asked. Now, she whispered, I believe that sometimes love doesn't come to rescue you. It comes to walk beside you. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I have something for you, he said. Inside was a deed, her name written next to his, co-owners of a brownstone apartment overlooking the park. A home, he said simply, for you and Eli, for us if you'll allow it. Lana's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude, not pain. She smiled through them. Ethan Park, she said softly, you don't ask for much, do you? He laughed quietly. Just forever. She took his hand, squeezing it gently. Then forever starts now. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the three of them stood together by the lake. Mother, child, and the man who had believed in her light before she remembered it herself. Behind them, the city buzzed on, unaware of the quiet miracle that had unfolded in its heart. And as dusk fell over Central Park, Lana finally felt the world exhale with her, the long, deep breath of a story that had found its peace. So that's how our story comes to an end. But if you're still here, watching until this moment, maybe something in Lana's journey touched a part of your heart too, didn't it? Maybe it reminded you of how fragile we can be, and yet, how strong we truly are when life tries to drown us. You see, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace after the storm. Like the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the obstacle is the way. Every pain, every betrayal, every night you thought would break you, it was actually shaping you into someone unshakable. Lana's story isn't just about revenge or survival, it's about rebirth. About learning that love doesn't have to rescue you. Sometimes it just needs to walk beside you. So maybe tonight, take a deep breath. Forgive what tried to destroy you. Start again, quietly but bravely. And if this story made you feel something, hope, strength, or maybe even the will to heal, then hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so we can keep walking these stories of courage and redemption together. Because your story, it's not over yet either.